This is Kaylan, better known as Professor Cygonus and Angels. And my angels and I are as one human being. I know it is beyond the sight you're seeing. We're doing very good, my miracles, my wonderful angels. And remember to have healthy eating, appropriate speech, appropriate behavior, appropriate clothing, appropriate spacing, and know the science and anatomy of all things. Also, remember to have the goals of the body, the household, and the outside responsibilities. Hey, speaking of bodily responsibilities, let's get our chapstick that we have in our fanny pack at all times. And put that on. If you do not have a fanny pack already, you should definitely get one. Today, we will be speaking about the importance of understanding that it is always important to say no to influence. A lot of the times people introduce influence to people, whether if it is children or adults. But on the behalf of the children and adults who have experienced this influence, this specific influence, or any kind of bad influence, wanting to provide proof to prove that this specific influence is very misguided. Do you all remember the life documentary of my life story? When I introduced myself and I said, if there's any bad influences in your life, you should always say no to bad influence. When I was little, and we're specifically going to be speaking about medical marijuana. If you have heard, it became legalized. But yet you have possibly noticed some people with very abnormal drug-like behaviors with cannabis and or marijuana. And you wonder, what is causing that abnormal behavior? When I was a child, I was very influenced into marijuana. When I stopped doing that as a child, I actually heard a pastor on the television. His name was T.D. Jakes. Unfortunately, he passed away recently, but he truly made an incredible difference in my life. And he explained that marijuana causes infection during the time of him preaching. It was the most relevant and awakening moment of my life as a child. It was very shocking because I never had heard from anyone else besides that pastor that marijuana caused infection. But the reason why I completely stopped after hearing that is because I had an awakening self-awareness moment. That I was very dizzy. I was having a lot of brain dysfunctions and even neurological problems. Difficulties in communications and action of what I was doing. It is important to have self-awareness. Sometimes when our body is going through things, during the time of things like influence, we do not recognize what exactly is going on with our body. But it is important to be very open-minded and very willingful on what you go through. And the willingfulness of change during the time of being influenced is very important. We're going to provide some backup proof that there are CT scans of the brain that marijuana causes in the impact of what marijuana does. One moment while the documents are gathered. Have you ever wondered, what is the impact of marijuana on the brain? And why is it so heavily influenced? For so long, people have tried to say that marijuana helps cancer and to kill cancer. But people want to abnormally smoke it. Anything that you smoke in your lungs abnormally is going to cause very bad dysfunction problems because it is not natural to smoke anything in your lungs. But let's go over the documentation of the CT scans that was collected by the Harvard University and other universities. And this was by the Harvard Medical School. On April 2014, The Harvard Medical School casual marijuana is linked to the change of brain volume, shape, and density of the gray matter in the brain. And that affects decision making, that affects your thoughts, and that affects your actions. Just recently, I encountered a neighbor that was very abnormally behaving and accusing people of things that was very abnormal. This is the proof that there is abnormities that marijuana causes. Sad to say that marijuana has influenced children. You may think, if this is the impact, this is a major impact, if this is the impact of the brain on a scan, then what is the influence on secondhand smoke, if there is any children around, or if there's anyone around in general? And now we will provide the document proof that secondhand smoke with marijuana is actually worse than cigarettes. Research affirms that secondhand smoke from marijuana is a definite health hazard, including high levels of particulate matter that lodge deeply in the lungs, 3.5 times the average emission rate. The understanding of what marijuana does medically is something that we should definitely be aware of. Whether if there's someone that does that around, you do not want to be around that kind of smoke. If somebody does it, make sure to not be anywhere near the area and to let the person know that you have seen the proof from the Harvard University scans that they had taken brain scans and shown a normal brain versus a person who does marijuana. The reason why that does that to the brain, think of the body like an ocean of absorption. The body is always absorbing things. Marijuana has a sticky yellow sap that develops. And sometimes when people have glass pieces that they put around that, you can see the yellow sticky things that is on that sticky yellow sap builds up over time, and the more that people do it is the worse that it gets for their brain, for their bloodstream, and for all of their organs. When somebody puts smoke into their lungs, your lungs is always trying to get oxygen and the needed things that the lungs needs. But not only the lungs that need that, but also the bloodstream. The heart helps to flow the blood to every single organ and to all of your muscles. It is important to understand that if there is anything else that you are breathing in other than oxygen, nitrogen, or water particles in the air, that whatsoever goes into your lung can flow through your bloodstream immediately. And if that gets to your brain, that starts to do damage, if that is very bad or toxic. So the understanding of the recent day studies on what has been documented in cannabis. Cannabis is a drug, and people influence it like it is a herbal medicine. But we want to help you all become aware that that is not a herbal medicine, and that was a major misguidance. And I want you to have a self-awareness moment, if you or someone you know has done that, to understand what that does to your brain. And we pray that people will not fall for influence, and that you all will understand that sometimes you are influenced into things that the people that influence you do not know all about. But now you have been provided proof to understand the severities of what that can do to the brain. If you would like to see more brain scans, I can show the brain scans now. Gathering the documents. This is a document from the Journal of Neurologically and Neurosurgery. They had done some brain scans on a patient that had major signs of stroke, and that was associated with the marijuana that they was doing. As you can see, that brain looks very concerning on the fact of what the marijuana had done to their brain. The understanding of misguidance is when you have to come to the acceptance that you have been misguided by people telling you that cannabis is good when it is not. Did you know that heroin is a plant too? That's correct. And I think that we need to go over the brain scans of all of substance abuse and what that does to your brain. And you're going to see that marijuana is very similar to the other drugs on what that does to the brain. So let's gather the document for that. This is the data for all different types of drug abuse and what that does to your brain. So here at the top, on the upper left, you see that that is a very healthy brain. But then you can see that the 4 years of marijuana has completely damaged and ruptured that person's brain. And then 4 years of that person smoking at the age of 22 and their brain is completely dysfunction. There is other things that have obviously caused a lot of damages to the brain. We want to make sure that you all can screen photo if you want to screen photo the proof, and just to have that there. The severities of what those other types of drug abuse does to your brain, marijuana is very close in that field. Why have they illegalized it? Because it is a very misguided thing. And people in their misguidance is absolutely unacceptable. And in fact, for years they fought to make it legalized, but I think it's just as bad as, I think it's actually worse than cigarettes. And cigarettes are very bad also. Anything that you smoke and put into your lungs is unhealthy and not natural. Nature will not put smoke in your lungs. That's not what nature does. And it's important to stick to nature because nature has incredible power. And in fact, for me, when I got hit by a 30,000-pound car and I was thrown 75 to 100 feet through the air, I chose not to get anything of what the doctors had tried to prescribe me, and I chose to do nature. And that's like eating an apple. I love apples, or sometimes ginger root. I love ginger root. I used to eat ginger root all of the time, and that was naturally antifungal, natural antibiotic. And there's tons of natural healing things, but marijuana is a very misguided thing. And so you should be very aware that not all plants are meant for consumption and definitely not meant to be smoked in your lungs. Heroin is something that was influenced to the soldiers in the military. And for a long time, they had soldiers in the military doing heroin thinking that it was a steroid. Next thing you know, further studies. It took a long time before realizing that that was a major drug that impacted the brain in a negative way. And the soldiers had suffered from being misguided about heroin. And heroin is also a plant. And so I see that very similar to marijuana. But the problem is that they have a lot of dispensaries and they have misguided so many people. What that does to your brain physically, you have seen. But what it does to you subconsciously and in a spiritual manner and a physical manner is the feeling of that is very different, possibly. That can cause concussion syndrome as well. When the Harvard University had provided the document of the brain scans, the understanding of them saying that that causes dysfunction in decision making, as well as your thoughts, that also can be impactful towards the feelings that you have. neurological problems as well, on your feelings. Say that you had a negative emotion more so often, and you was usually constantly negative about things. The one thing that I've experienced with people that have done that, and I have tried to communicate, in an example, my neighbor, it was very shocking how abnormal that it was for someone to conflict in a way that is very unhealthy. I'm trying to say this without saying this because I feel like it's important to also keep things private in a sense of a way. I know usually I do not, but in certain cases I feel as though I should keep things a little bit private. But I will say that I was speaking to my neighbor, I'm not going to say who, and she told me previous that she was going to get an electric fence for her dogs, and she was going to put it underground and give them shock collars so that they would not run in the road and get ran over. She was complaining as my angels and I with Mrs. Deborah was going up the road. Her house is passing up the road. Mrs. Deborah stopped just to say hi, and she suddenly started to complain. She grabbed her dog by the neck and started to complain about them. And when she was complaining, she had expressed that she could not have them on the collar or leash because they were getting choked, and they would tie themselves around the tree and they would choke. And they can die of suffocation if they bury themselves in the ground, or they get choked and they fall to the ground and they can suffocate. There's a lot of problems with dogs and leashes tying themselves around the trees, which is why she told me that she was going to get these little fence posts that go underground to where she has a shock collar, which is why, like sort of like an electric fence or something like that. So what happened when Mrs. Deborah and I was going up the hill? So I smelled that she smoked marijuana, and the child was next to her, and so she was possibly having the child secondhand smoking, which is very dangerous for children and developing brains, because you see what that does to your brain in the scans. Well, afterwards, she accused me of being racist. She says, you tell me about these fences because I'm black, and you know, I'm not racist. I have not ever felt racist towards anybody. In fact, when I went to a school, Tyner, when I was in the children's home, I was pretty outcasted because I was white, and that's what they told me. They would call me white girl instead of calling me my name, but I don't feel like it has anything to do with color, because in the children's home, I had a really amazing friend that I seen as a sister, and she was not the same color as me, but I see no difference in her. And she actually had a very upright behavior, and she had a lot of sophistication. She spoke with amazing manners, and I actually pray for her currently right now, because when I was in the children's home, I did not get to check up on a lot of children on how they're doing in today's time. But I know from the way that she behaved in the children's home that she is doing very well. And I do not think in stereotypical ways that people with color behave a certain way, because every individual is different and it has nothing to do with color. And so she had accused me of being racist because I recommended, what I said is I said, since she was complaining, I told her, I said, you should consider temporary adoption for the dogs until you can get the electric fence that she had previously told me about before. And then suddenly she proclaimed that she did not tell me about an electric fence or shock collars or anything like that. And she had said that I was racist because I told her about the electric fence. I would not have known that you could even get that until she told me about it before that point in time. And she was obviously very high on marijuana. You could smell that everywhere. And I think that when it comes to children, I do not think that children should be around that kind of behavior. And I did tell her, I said, I will call DHS if I see you smoking around that child. Because I knew that it was very abnormal behavior to randomly accuse someone of being racist. And she even started to call me names. I have the text messages of her calling me a lot of names and saying things that were very random, outbursted. And she tried to tell me, I told her that marijuana is causing her to have these outbursts of negativity and very strange, abnormal behavior. And it's not good for a child to be around that kind of behavior. And so I had no problem with her before. I actually helped her to clean her property, and I put a lot of labor forth to help them clear their property. And I had also bought school supplies for the child, and I gave them free anatomy puzzles, and I even had tried to stop a conflict between one neighbor and the other with her before. But with marijuana abuse and substance, we've shown you all the proof that marijuana can cause neurological problems with the brain. And the physical proof from the Harvard University, which is one of the best universities on this planet, according to the world's database, had shown the proof of the CT scans of the brain and MRIs also of the brain, of what that does to the brain over time, on how similar that marijuana damage is to the other drug abuse things. And a lot of people, they've been very misguided on marijuana. And I know the understanding of some people that are not willing to change, but when it comes to certain things, I think it's very important to change, especially if it's causing issues and you are not deciding very well decisions, and you're having malfunctions in the way that you speak, and you're also conflicting upon others in negative ways that is very random and outbursted, accusing people of things that is not accurate or normal. I think that marijuana causes people to also have emotional outbursts. When I was a child and when I was influenced, did I have those problems? Yes. When I was a child, it was very misguided. But as an adult, I look back at when I was a child, and yes, I did have a lot of medical difficulties. And the marijuana caused concussion syndrome, and I spoke about that in my life documentary story. You can actually go back on my YouTube channel, and you can go through the playlist, and I had expressed how marijuana was very misguided to me as a child. And as an adult, I look back and I understand that that child had concussion syndrome and a lot of neurological problems. So did that affect my speech? Yes, that affected my speech. It affected the way that I thought. And also I would misprocess things sometimes as a child. When somebody spoke, it was hard to understand what they said. And I was very dizzy all the time as a child. Now, at first, it was not as bad, but the more that it was done was the more that it had made the malfunction problem. So how long did it take to recover from that, you ask? After stopping of the marijuana and hearing this pastor, T.D. Jakes, on the television that day, and he just said marijuana causes infection, and I had a self-awareness moment. I promise you, I never did marijuana ever after that. And it's the fact that when that pastor, T.D. Jakes, he is an amazing pastor that really will awaken you in so many ways. And he was on the television at my Aunt Michelle's house, and my great Aunt Michelle's house. And I heard that pastor say that. And he was speaking through the Holy Spirit. And he just said, the Holy Spirit just makes me want to express this now. There was possibly someone who had that smell on them in the place or whatsoever else, but it was so relevant to my life. At that time, I had a self-awareness moment and thought about how dizzy it was. It was difficult just to grab a doorknob on the door. I can vividly remember trying to grab the doorknob of the door and having difficulties doing that because of the malfunctions that the cannabis was doing. And so I have expressed to people the importance of understanding the dangers of cannabis, on why that should always be avoided, and the severities of influence, telling people. Now, that was the MRI CT scan proof from the Harvard of University that does that kind of damage to the brain. And we'll pull up the document once again. This is something that, a little down. This is something that really shows the complete damage of what that does to the brain. And I'm so thankful for that Pastor T.D. Jakes. And hopefully, if anybody's watching this episode that has that awakening moment here on this point, I pray that you will not ever do that ever again, and that you will be self-aware to understand what kind of malfunctions that caused on you and teach that to others. Because we want to spread the word and the understanding of what that does to the brain, so we can help people to recover from their trauma. See, there's two different types of trauma. There's trauma that you do yourself, and then there's trauma that others do to you. In other words, self-conflicting trauma, and then confliction that others do to you in traumatization. So if others conflict onto you and you have trauma from that, I know that compensation is very important, and getting to the source of the problem is very important. But as for self-conflicting trauma, you can overcome that with your decisions. Because people that pay for marijuana are spending money out of their pocket to get something that's traumatizing their body. That is a decision, and it's a decision that you can stop right now at this current moment. And you can choose the best decisions as long as you focus your mind on your purpose. And we have incredible purpose, always have a goal. We are to balance and purify existence, to put things in proper order, to end the global crisis. This planet is going through a crisis: climate change, overpopulation, waste management system, poverty, most definitely. All of these things are very severe to have in the world. What is the cause of that? A lot of people are doing this self-conflicting trauma, and then they conflict on others. As I had experienced the neighbor do to me yesterday. And so it is important to understand the impact of marijuana and to never do that. And if you know anyone that really needs this message of self-awareness, self-awakening, please share this episode. And I pray that you all will choose the wisest decisions, because you have potential. You have to know your potential. Do not allow those bad things to be in your life. Do not welcome those bad things. People that are paying their money to get something that is neglectful towards them. You could be spending that on things that can help you cope with what you're going through, whether if it's crocheting, whether if it's drawing and art. If you want to do drawing, if you want to do writing, journaling is really good. Journaling is actually a very healthy habit. And I personally do a little bit of journaling in my life as well. And so I feel like if you all do journaling, we could be journal buddies. And also doing crocheting is a really amazing meditative activity that could help you to be calm about things. It's important not to be chaotic. A lot of the times when you have so many decisions to make, it feels chaotic. But you can be the eye of the storm and calm that chaos with your own decisions. And art. If anyone is an artist and you love to paint, you could be spending your money on getting things like canvases, or even you can paint a mural on the wall. And actually, I want to do a mural, a painting on the wall, but that is a process. Also, if you want to do art, I have incredible lessons on my YouTube channel. You can search me Professor Cygnus, spelled Cygnus. And if you want to learn sign language, that's on the YouTube channel as well. Make sure to go to the playlist. After going to playlist, you will see the Pixel Art Challenge. So you could utilize that Pixel Art Challenge to do incredible canvases or even murals on the wall. And I know that fly is bothering me, and you've seen that. But along with the understanding of what we need for the world, we need people to not fall for the influences, whether if it's marijuana, whether if it's any kind of decisions of your decisions and your investments. It's always important to do everything you can to better the world, to end global crisis, because you could be making a difference. And I believe that every individual can make an incredible and wonderful difference, and you should believe that too. Stay healthy and invest wisely, and remember, never fall for the influence of marijuana, for it can cause concussion syndrome, neurological problems, and obvious brain damage. So we pray that you all will also spread the word if you want to share this episode. And to someone that is in need, it is important to have self-awareness. So think back at your memories. Are your memories dizzy? Are your memories in the understanding of what kinds of processings had happened? If you had difficulties in processings, why your processings had those difficulties? And if anybody was under the influence of marijuana, now you know what the cause was. And so getting to the source of the problem and recovering from that trauma is very important. Stay healthy and invest wisely. And remember that our life matters and we can make a very big difference. And you, yes, you have incredible potential. So reach to that potential. Be the best that we can be. Because life is such a masterpiece of this amazing puzzle that we always want to seek to understand. Help to end the global crisis as well. There's so many purposes in this world that you could focus on. Stay healthy and invest wisely. Excellent processing. Very good.